Hey folks, it's Red Clay and I'm back, and I want to talk about the core sample that was submitted by Alton Gas, and this is going to show you what is supposedly going to be going into the river. Now if you look under the and again this is right out of their environmental assessment, these are the elevations that the core samples were taken from, and there's a grand total of 6 samples that were taken. So what I've done is I've taken the elevations that are on these samples and the number of the sample, and I've plotted it on a stick that I've geared up here behind me, and I'll get into that in a second. And basically I've used 1 centimeter to represent 1 meter in depth of the whole core sample, which is about 80 to 100 meters long. Now, to accurately predict what is actually going in the river, realistically, the whole core sample from top to bottom should be dissolved and then analyzed, and that'll give you the true figure as to what the amount of chemicals and the different things that are in the salt deposit that are going to go into the river. But what they've done instead is they've taken small little pieces of the core sample and had those sent in and sampled. And you know, it reeks of cherry picking. They could have done a random sample, which I'll point out here, for example, every 10 meters, just a random sample. But that isn't what was done. There's a different distance between the samples, and I'll go over that in a minute and show you that these were picked probably visibly because they were pleasing to the eye. So if the core sample is not accurate, all the science below it falls apart, because all the science is based on figures that are obtained from core samples or from the sample out of the cores that were submitted. You know, it begs the question. There's approximately 6 pieces. They're around, I guess, around 18 inches long. It could be a foot. They could maybe 2 feet. So let's just say they're 2 feet to be sure. So there's 12 feet has been submitted out of 300 feet, or 250 to 300 feet. That doesn't seem like an accurate way of determining what is actually in that core. And particularly when you're going to be dumping it in a river. That might be fine protocol for dumping it into, in their words, an aquifer or abandoned oil well that's already toxic. But we're not talking about a toxic environment, and brine waste is toxic. And the analysis that from these cores is not representative of what is actually in the total salt deposit. We're only talking about 1 core. They said that they did 4. Now there's 18 caverns. You know, logic would dictate, if you're putting it in a river, that you'd want to know what was down there, not just an educated guess based on 1 core and very small samples taken in that core. So I'm going to get behind the camera now and try to zoom in on this. You'll have to bear with me because I'm shooting this by myself, and I'll zoom in on this and show you where these cores were taken from. And it does kind of smack of the appearance that, you know, they took the nicest ones that they could see. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason other than that for where the cores were taken. So just give me a second here. Okay, I was going to zoom in here and basically try and show you what I've got going on here. Okay, you can see the little lines, I get my finger in here, off here are 1 centimeter, and they represent 1 meter. So we've got all of these going down, and I've put 100 of them on there. Okay, so you can see it goes straight. Oh, Right? It goes down to 960 meters is where I've taken it. Their first core sample comes out at 942.69 meters. That's the elevation. The second one, sample number 2, comes out at 932. Now there's only 10 meters difference between these two core samples. If we go to number 3, it's 919.15 meters is the elevation. This is from their information, not mine. And that's 13 meters. So the first one is 10 meters apart, 13. Seems kind of odd. Now these marks here that I have, these are 10 meter marks. If you were taking, I'm sorry about that again. If you were taking your samples at a random set every 10 meters, then you would take them at these marks here, all the way up to the top of the core. And that would give you a more random idea of what exactly is in there if you were only going to take portions of the core. So we'll continue down here. So there's sample number 3 at 919. Now there's quite a difference. 35 meters later we have sample 4 and sample 5, and they're only a meter apart. So there's no rhyme or reason to, or even anything random that you could say that why these particular samples are taken from where they're taken, other than the fact that they look to be the best samples to test. Now we go another 25 meters all the way up to 860 meters is the last sample, sample number 06. So if you look at that, I mean, it's very curious. These are very telling, these two samples. Now if you look at the whole rest of the core, these little tiny pieces out of the core are not very representative of what else could be in that core. So where is the core is the question, and what is in the rest of the core? How come the whole thing wasn't dissolved? And add to that question, where are the other 3 cores that there is no mention of anywhere in any paperwork or environmental assessment or otherwise? If you look down, there's an awful lot of that core, other than those little red lines, which are probably 1.5 feet long of the piece of core. So you've got 12 feet maximum versus a core that's 80 to 100 meters long, 240 to 300 feet long. So that raises a lot of suspicions in my mind right there, and the fact that there's only one core. Again, I go back to my scale of outside, one core, 6 little pieces of salt, this big around, we'll say, for 500,000 dump truck loads of material. Now each cavern, I would think, should have at least 12 to 24 cores. This is going in a river. This is not going to be dumped into a toxic waste receptacle. So that's something to think about. Now, the next little video I'm going to do, I'm going to get into the analysis of these cores, the ones that they actually chose to submit, and we'll talk about that analysis and what else may be in these other cores. Okay, well, that's it for now.